Okay, I think we'll get started. I'd like to, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Dorsey, the founder and chief scientist of Mental Canvas, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's Mental Canvas webinar. This is our first in a series of topically focused webinars. Today's topic is Mental Canvas for conceptual architectural design. I'd like to start with some very brief introductions. We're going to have two presenters today. Carol Hsiung, who's a senior designer at FXCollaborative in New York, and Jonathan Wirth, who's a principal and senior designer for HOK in Kansas City and a member of the firm's global design board. I'm also joined today by my colleagues Rod Recker and Rebecca Resnick from Mental Canvas. So Carol and Jonathan share a love of and facility with freehand drawing to develop and communicate ideas. They've both used Mental Canvas to tell professional as well as personal stories. And our goal today is to have them share some of their experiences in using Mental Canvas. And we'll hear from each of them in turn and maybe do some back and forth. And then we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to use the Q&A function to post questions or in the chat window. By way of just a brief background, Mental Canvas, I like to think of it as picking up where drawing and paper leave off. Mental Canvas really elevates the process of drawing and augments it with spatial strokes, 3D navigation, and freeform animations, but all grounded in a drawing process that we aspire to make as easy to use as pencil and paper. So we'll begin by starting with Carol Hsiung. Carol is going to show us or start off by showing us a project that she's worked on recently known as 1 Willoughby Square in Brooklyn. She's going to take us through that just so you can see an example of a Mental Canvas drawing. And then she's going to shift and do some live drawing for us, showing you how you can build up a basic scene using Mental Canvas. So Carol, take it away.
Okay, so this, and I'm so glad. Hi, Dan. He knows this project. So we are actually, our office is planning to move in October to Brooklyn, 1 Willoughby Square. So this was a project that I actually worked on just for this presentation because it was interesting because we were basically our own clients. So we had to sort of sell our design to ourselves. So I put this together so that we could kind of like all, get excited about our new home. We have been planning this for the last, 4 years or something. So this was, I did this, 2 years ago, maybe, can't remember. But anyway, the thing about Mental Canvas is that it's so great for telling a story. I remember years ago when Julie first approached me, she wanted to test out this new software. And she had found me because I was doing blogs. Do you remember blogs? But anyway, we used to do blogs, and she found me because I did some blogs advocating hand drawing in the office. So she thought, oh, I would be a really good candidate. So I remember meeting her at City Bakery, and I really didn't want to do it because I'm a little computer phobic. But I thought, okay, I gotta just learn something. So I did it, and you know what? She gave me this pen and this tablet, and she told me to sketch City Bakery. So I sketched some bakers and pastries and tables, and I fell in love with it because it was, you know how when you're little and you ride your bike, that feeling of being a kid again. And it was kind of like having a piece of paper with crayons. And it was sort of like learning how to draw and kind of, it was just exciting. I was so excited, and it took a while to learn it. I mean, it's like riding a bike, you have to practice, I guess. But it's a very exciting. I still love it. And the thing when you're drawing in it, you kind of you escape. You can go inside your drawings. So that was my first experience. So we you know, I know sometimes it's kind of daunting because it's so kind of like it's like this, you know, big space where you could keep drawing. So sometimes, so you know, when we work, you know, we can put some reference drawing in there to give it some scale. But it is just like how you're drawing with a pencil and paper. You know, it's three-dimensional, as Julie says, it's drawing in different new dimensions. So I guess I will start by drawing, and Julie, you can interject anytime you want, but I guess I'll start with a blank canvas.
Okay, sounds good.
How's that? So this is our blank canvas.
Yeah, so mental canvas scenes are comprised of drawings on canvases, and canvases are almost like transparent sheets of paper, and you'll see canvases showing up on the left side of the tablet, and then along the bottom you'll see what we call bookmarks or key views. And you could see even in the first example that the software is really about drawings and views. It's not, you don't necessarily have to have metric correctness. You don't have to build out a full 3D scene, but it's all about creating drawings, spatial drawings, and views that move in them. So here Carol is developing a drawing. She's now drawing on one canvas.
And I'm just drawing a skyline, like, you know, and basically it's like a flat drawing, you know. It's like when I first conceptually, I feel like I'm drawing on transparent pieces of paper or canvases that can be, you know, moved anywhere in this sort of space. So, you know, it starts out flat, and you know, you can just keep. Oops, let me see. I guess I'm drawing.
Yeah, now Carol just added a second canvas to her scene, and she did that by picking a feature in her first drawing and then swinging out with what we call our hinge tool to create a second drawing.
So I'm going to try to draw a person on a bridge.
And now she's creating another canvas closer to the foreground and continuing the drawing.
Maybe I'll draw some foreground and vegetation. You can change your colors. So it's, you know, it's sort of three-dimensional. So now let's make it, I mean, still kind of two-dimensional, but we can start kind of creating some more dimensionality to it. Let's see.
So Carol's got her water strokes are actually living on the canvas that's in the back with the skyline. And she's now just selected those. And she's doing something that we call projection or reprojection of those strokes. And she's actually adjusting them now so that they connect with our foreground canvas.
And the thing about this is, like, you can draw, and then you can, you know, you get another layer. So what made it really interesting is, like, if you know how to use Photoshop, to me it's very similar because it works with different layers. So you can, you know, have a layer and then like remove it because it's, you know, like, I don't want that anymore. You can get rid of it. So you basically just, it's like layering with trace a little bit to create some three-dimensional thing. So then this thing I learned, this is a new thing that I learned with this this bridge, and I can actually duplicate it, like, because, you know, to be a little lazy, I can kind of go and make another one there. So then it's like I kind of made 2 layers to make it a little bit more three-dimensional. So what else do we need? Maybe we want to put some background behind the skyline. So let's see. I'm going to do. Oops. Back here. But then, you know, it's sort of like, then you sort of see, like, you can't see the skyline anymore. So what you can do is actually start putting some white. You can white it out, so you can kind of make some opacity to make things stand out. So maybe we can add, oh, so the thing about this, you can keep adding stories. You can keep kind of adding to the story. So let's see. Let's add a little bit more foreground, and maybe we can add some more people to remind us of our life before all this happened, where we could hang out with crowds. You know, remember these days, everybody? And maybe they're like, oh, by the water. And then do you remember, maybe they're all like flying a kite or something together? Remember people when they used to do that too? And maybe it's like maybe it's a flight contest, like a flight, a kite festival. Maybe you want to create a little bit more drama.
So what Carol's showing here is a pretty organic process, the kind of thing that's easy to do in this particular software, that is draw and kind of rework your strokes, move things around. Similar to kind of like if you think about where you bump up against limitations with pencil and paper right now, this allows you to kind of extend that process. And the original actually sort of inspiration for Mental Canvas was the kinds of sketchbooks that architects develop, where they have often many different sketches of the same project at different scales and so on. And the idea here was to kind of be able to bring all of those drawings together in a common sketch space and then continue to work with them and fuse them together.
Another thing that I love about this is that you can actually create a fly through. So you can actually start creating a story, a sequence, like movie making. I love this, you know.
Yeah. So along the bottom here, Carol is just selecting some views of her drawing.
And another thing that I love about this is that you can play with scale. So, you know, you can kind of and we like to call this the thinker. So I always love doing this sketch because when Julie first, you know, introduced me to Mental Canvas, the whole idea was basically, how do you get all those ideas in your head and get it onto your paper? So I just sort of like this image just because it sort of kind of was about that. It's all those brilliant ideas in your head and trying to, you know, celebrate them and expand them, you know. So that was exciting. I want to go here back to my son. So let's see. I'm going to get my son, and I'm going to push that away a little bit because I'm going to do something that I love doing. I call this hyperspace. I'm making up a new name. So anyway. Let's block it out. I use this white to block out views to make it cleaner. So now I love this idea of playing with this idea of different scales and moving the story along. So that was that's a fun thing to do. So anyway, another thing that I do a lot for work is building up basically environments. So there's this way of drawing where you're kind of you know, creating a story, but there's also creating, you know, architecture, I guess. And I'm an architect, so I love doing this. But let's go down the river. So we're going to go down the river a little bit. And then maybe we want to build a house. Yes, we love houses. And maybe this house wants to have, oops. I don't know, maybe you want the perfect view for your house. So I'm going to make this. And I'm going to make a oops. Maybe this is my window. And this is me. And I want to him. So I'm gonna
For those of you who are new, Carol is basically dropping in new canvases here and then picking up her pen and drawing on them. She's using that bird's eye view above to position the canvases relative to her current drawing.
let's pretend we're having a plan here. I'm just pretending. Maybe the plan, we're gonna have, you know, a beautiful table here and table here or something. So, you know, you're sort of playing with the space and building it. And so maybe we need a wall. Let's do a wall. And like, you know, sometimes you don't, you can just sort of estimate it. And let's, I don't know, let's make that wall red. And I didn't get that right. It's not, but I can fix it. See, you can just fix it. Mental Canvas is very forgiving because it's like a sketch, you know, you can erase too. So let's see. Oh, it needs a roof. So I'm just making this up as I go along. So please, if it's a bad design, I'm just showing you how fun it is. So maybe we'll make a second floor. Yeah, let's do that. They looked like they were going to fall. So maybe this needs to be a wood floor. Maybe we should make a swimming pool. It's really hot here.
Another thing you'll notice here is that, like I said at the beginning, mental canvas is really about drawings and views, key views. And so Carol is going back and forth between draw mode, as you see up on the right, indicated by the pen, and view mode, which is indicated by a camera.
I wish I was in the pool now. Swimming. I'm making a garden in the backyard. I think you need some more vegetation in front.
Another thing that Carol is showing here is that you can position drawings not just in the front or back, but anywhere between. So she can pick up on cues in some of the existing drawings and then kind of add new drawings or canvases relative to other things in situ.
You can separate things in different layers so that later on you can be more flexible to change them. And maybe you need some stairs to get down there, so. You can isolate that.
You can see pretty clearly here what Carol's doing is she's got this stairs which were basically hanging out into space, and she didn't actually translate them, she actually, or rotate them, she actually projected them so that they connect in perspective to the ground plane below.
I think it should be a cascading swimming pool now, like Villa Estes. What do you think? I don't know. So, you know, the idea is that basically you can keep going. But that's what I love about it.
So this might be a good transition point to showing your, I don't know how much more you want to go.
No, I want to stop. Okay. Jonathan, please take over.
No, one thing I thought might be nice before we hand off to Jonathan is if you showed your heroes.
Okay, I can do example. That. I love that one. That's a good example of storytelling. Open.
So this next example is something Carol emailed me one day after the stay-at-home order was issued, and I think we were all feeling very thankful for the frontline workers who are making our lives possible. And she came up with this kind of thank you. And one of the things I like about this is it's really shows the idea that you can kind of tell a story and create some spaces without actually creating walls. You're really just moving through a set of drawings.
And I sort of forgot to thank probably so many more people, but I remember I did this and I posted it. And then someone said, oh, you forgot the truck drivers. So then I went back and added that. So if I've forgotten anything else, you can let me know. I'll keep adding. So many more. So when you do these, I just like I watch movies, I read books, and I'm a big escapist at heart. And mental canvas is another form of that. You go in here and you just keep this layering, and it looks so like it's all clumped up, and I don't even know what it's looking like until afterwards. And I'm like, wow, that's a mess. And then and it's neat how the scales all kind of look like they don't go together, but then when you can string them together and it works. It's just fun. It's just a lot of fun. So anyway, and look how big the world is. You can keep drawing. I mean, it's like endless. It's kind of scary, very daunting. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Carol. That was wonderful. Why don't we transition over now to Jonathan? So as Carol noted at the beginning, she was a very early kind of guinea pig or mental canvas user, willing to humor me and try something very new. Jonathan is a much newer mental canvas user. He's only been using the system for a few months. And so hand it over to him and let him share some of his experiences in using mental canvas, again, both for professional and personal projects.
Thanks, Julie. And Carol, that was inspiring to see all that. I just love watching you draw. And so thank you so much for sharing. Is my screen showing, Rod?
Yeah, you're good, Jonathan.
Great. Okay, I can see it. So as Julie mentioned, started using the program relatively in a recent time frame. I think February-ish, January, February. There was a design technology forum in our studio in St. Louis, and I have a this is a 24-inch desktop tablet that's that's at the office, and with the individual trips I was able to bring it back to my house here. But I draw, and I've always drawn by hand with everything. I think it's a way that I connect with architecture a lot better. It's about connecting with the problem, design, and experiencing it. I think and so for me, I went from drawing in trace paper exclusively, just trashing my workspace, filling it with study after study, and that's just how I love to work. And then transitioning digitally, and then our design and technology, one of our colleagues said, you've got to try this new program, relatively new program called Mental Canvas. I think you would love it. I think you'd be perfect to kind of beta test it. And so away we go. And I started in February. It is a different, and watching Carol sketch, it's impressive. It is also you have to think about things a little differently. It's sort of a thinking in terms of scenes. Thinking about placing elements, having a frame of reference is key, because the space is vast within Mental Canvas. I mean, you can work. So for me, it was preparing. I was like, I want to try this, and I want to. We're preparing for an interview, and I want to capture some sort of video, and this. Everything all the bookmarks Carol shared, they can all be exported to higher, lower res videos, which can then be dropped into a PowerPoint or anything like that, shared through email or a link or whatever. And so for me, it was a very practical, like, how do I get a sort of sketches, elicit responses from clients, from colleagues, much different. And is there a way, and I saw this really interesting way to then the sketches can be turned into videos. So that was the initial thing. And so this was one of the first things that I created, which was just trying to communicate in an interview how we would approach moving through an existing building and what observations we would have. And so this was animated as a video, and I was talking over it in the interview. And so all this is very rudimentary. So I just took and created, and actually what's cool about this program is that you can drop images in and all different planes. You can split the image and break it. You can then sketch over the top of the image and turn the image off, right? So then you can use it as a reference if you have streetscapes and things like that. So what I did was just really start to had this animated as a video like Carol showed with different bookmarks. So I started out with a series of scenes that this, by the way, in a video or a PowerPoint would just run smoothly. You didn't have to click anything. It just ran through this sequence that then you can then just have some images and talk about different aspects of it through a space. But when you look at it overall, it's just a series of images that are dropped on canvases that then I added text to. It's really that simple. It took a few hours. This was an excuse for me to learn it over a weekend and try to think about it. So that was the first thing that I had tried. So a similar thing to what Carol described about doing something when working remotely. I wanted to kind of learn how to, an excuse to learn, I think, is I love doing that, where, all right, I want to transition from an aerial image of a space. And many people probably have seen this video. I've taken out the ukulele background music for this, but where I wanted just to try to transition from an aerial image down to a space. It was our church in our community where no one could go. Physically you couldn't congregate. So I created this video that then kind of simulated what an experience we'd been missing as a community. And I didn't expect it to have as much of a response as it did, but it was huge. But it really is just starting out with a 2D image, Google Earth, and then I just sketched over the top of it. And not unlike what Carol showed, I sketched over the top of it, and I just added enough depth in terms of canvases to then start to move toward the sketch. I didn't change anything, and all of these up here are just snapshots of the journey. So I sketched it, but I was very careful about sequencing the bookmarks and the pages first. So, and I'd say in contrast to when Carol was kind of generating the sketches and then kind of framing the view, I kind of set the scenes as I went through. It was just a way for me to learn the program. I guess that's the biggest thing. And then transitioning down to a ground level view, which was, if I look on the left here, I'm going to get down to a under level. Let's see, where's this? There is a sketch underneath here, if I can find it. There it is. So this was if you can see here, this was a street level view of the church, and I needed that to kind of generate the drawing and learn how to layer it. And then within that sketch, I drew it as one kind of 2D drawing, and then I slowly added more people so that when you see sort of like Carol was showing, you know, there's different layers of people just to add that depth, because I knew I was going to move through it. I wanted to talk about kind of moving through into the sanctuary to kind of this was showing, it was Palm Sunday, so this was about the story of moving through from the outside in, and I wanted to do that too. I wanted to learn how to move from the outside in and talk about that. And then you can also, in the bookmark tool, you can turn on and off layers to show up at certain scenes, so you don't see all the detail from a distance. Like from a distance, I wanted to reveal things, and then moving through to the inside to a very simple, that's just a 2D sketch. There's nothing more to that than just a 2D drawing. But when you zoom out, if I turn all this on, and I actually have that sketch in this view, it's turned off. You don't see it. You don't see it until you get to the bookmark where it is existing. So it can be kind of jumbled, and when you're trying to sequence images, it's pretty easy to toggle or turn on or off things that you want to see at the right time. So when there's a video, it can be done, and it doesn't look too confusing for the viewer. Another one that I had done, and so this was me experimenting. I've done about half a dozen different of these things in the past few months, projects, some personal, but mostly project and preparing for talking about either designing with a team or preparing for an interview. This one here, and I think in terms of design, I think in sketching, when you're transitioning from exterior design in the process of architecture, I think your form and sight, and there's a natural transition and overlap to interior design. And sometimes, if not carefully thought through, crude sort of Revit wireframe with best intentions, or SketchUp models with best intentions that represent things accurately, they don't kind of give a sense of storytelling and kind of emotional response that you might want from a client. And so some sketches can inherently give some latitude to the design team that hasn't had the time yet to work that out. It also gives the client or the viewer a chance to fill in the gaps and sort of feel like they're like, okay, I'm a part of the process. So sketching in terms of a journey or a sequence is important. So this was sort of an outside in transition of just some very, very fast sketched lines with the sky in the background, and then just sequencing the images in a way that talks about, all right, here's an approach and an entry. Again, I'll just kind of pan and show you how simple it was. It just starts with a 2D drawing. In this case, there was a photo behind it of an image of a SketchUp model. So I inserted a SketchUp model image, drew over the top of it to make sure I got the proportions right, and then I just deleted the SketchUp image. But then you move through, and it just kind of shows enough about views inside to show a lobby, to show some nature beyond, and just showing enough to give the two-dimensional or the three-dimensional quality when you move and transition between bookmarks. And I think that's the thing for me. It was like 2D drawing in 2D, showing enough or moving things on canvas is just enough people so that when you transition to the next bookmark, you actually feel like you're moving to the next point. It's not a like an Adobe Premiere After Effects kind of thing where all you're doing is fading to the next image. You actually could sense some movement to the next image. So in this case, it was here to then transitioning to the next part in the sequence where you have courtyards connect to each other. And then you're just moving a little bit. Again, this is just, okay, there's a canvas in the foreground that we had from before. That yellow tone represents a wall in the distance, and the ceiling, that brown wood ceiling, I had hinged and made as a horizontal plane to give you that sense of scale. And then you're just turning a little bit of that same courtyard and adding a text. Again, this is probably natural to me in terms of drawing. I like to add a lot of text. People that work with me know there's a lot of notes, and sometimes those notes, those handwritten notes, can kind of add some life to a drawing that I don't like to take out. And then, viewing to a main public corridor, and then moving up. And so this is just, as you can see, you don't, the other stuff, there's the canopy from the other drawing, you know, but I didn't realize it till now it was right there. But you know, you can see, and then you're floating up to an upper floor with views to the water beyond. And that, but when you look at the whole, I mean, there's the not like Carol's sketch where it kind of overlaps. You know, you're setting up a series of scenes. The next one is a totally different one, and it's not a sequence. It's more of a, literally, if you imagine a big pinup wall, and it's just a bunch of sketches that I'm working on that I wanted to add a little bit of three-dimensional or spatial quality to it. I used this not unlike, you know, if those are familiar with Microsoft Whiteboard, which is, you know, probably more of us now are familiar with digitally creating pinups for people to review. I hadn't yet, up until this point, started thinking about it as part of my design process. The examples I had shown, there were models and everything started, images that I could reference. This was a starting with a blank sketched a space that I was sketching, you know, this is a 2D sketch, but starting to think about 3D. A plan view that is kind of tied to site. Detail or condition of how this thing relates. And so all of this right here was in 2D except for when I start moving in. So, you know, there's sort of sequences of, you can toggle back and forth and turn certain things on or off. This can be animated. You can then do screenshots, which is what I actually ended up doing with a team. So I use this with a team I'm working with digitally. This project started completely remotely as a team. So how do we talk as teams? How do we share information and also get people excited? It's important for teams in terms of design to feel sort of an excitement about the story and the idea as well. And so zooming in, so all I was doing is like, all right, sequencing some images and then looking at diagrams. Diagramming is important. So I started working on a series of layers on top of a plan sketch that then could pan, you know, looking at three-dimensional quality. And then here, there's a little bit of a tweak. So if you look at this, so you can see this is where I started to say, all right, let's rotate around and start thinking about the spatial sequence. So let me go back and I'll show you what I did. So this is all 2D, and then in a series of conversations with some folks from Mental Canvas, they were teaching me how to, like, all right, how do you you know, project canvases up and start to build form. There's sort of a breaking point, not a breaking point, but when you start building form, how much detail you put into it, and curves, you know, and how do you kind of hint at a curve or a shape. So in this case, I just started with a plan sketch over the top of a site plan that was scaled, and then made a roof here where I just sketched it, and then I just projected the canvas up, right? So, and then I had, you know, basically elevated the walls. It doesn't have to be perfect. That might not be 90 degrees from the surface, but that's okay. And then was able to say, all right, there's a background, like Carol's. I had a series of you know, canvases that just show the background of the approach, and then just kind of zooming in. So what's kind of neat is when you draw with pens or, you know, within Mental Canvas, you can adjust the transparency, so you can give a sense of glass and solid, and you can adjust that after the fact through layers. All of this down here, all of this on the left, the canvases, once you hinge them or rotate them around through the space, they're independent elements that can be changed. So if the color or the transparency needs to be altered, it's pretty easy to do that. And you can see that the 2D sketch that I had in plan, not like if you had it like in SketchUp where you had like a sketched plan view, it became the foreground for the, the base of this. So, and you've got some, it depends on the resolution of your sketch. You got some pixelation, but it's not too bad. And so and then, I threw a canopy in, so I drew that in plan and projected it up. So that's what I've been doing. That's just over the past few months. And so, I've been using it a lot for videos. Oh, and this one with this here, this overall. So what I've done is I'll take screenshots or snippets of these sketches. I may drop them into Microsoft Whiteboard, or I'll drop into a PowerPoint. And so it's a quick way to convey and talk through with my team. But when I shared this animated video with the team, and again, that's one of the challenges of working remotely, is you're not in the same space together. And a lot of times in design, actually I would say all the time in design, there's sort of a joint, there's a camaraderie needed, there's an excitement needed about design. And I felt like sort of the way this allowed me to kind of tell the design story got the project off on a good kind of feeling, because everybody's hesitant about starting something now. But when you can show the power of the story, and what I mean hesitant about starting now is you can't be in the same space. Things can be broken down just to like numbers and quantitative data, but the design and the storytelling and the sketching part, we've had to this has helped me to figure out ways to kind of keep people motivated and excited too. So there's some side benefits. So anyway, those are just a few examples. I think that I had. If anybody had any thoughts or questions, I'd be happy to chime in or answer as best I can. So
Jonathan, actually it might be nice if you just showed your bookmark sequence, like just to end
this
that
one here?
discussion. Yeah, just to show.
So yeah, the bookmark sequence. So mine, Carol had hers on her. So this is Adele. That her bookmarks were shown down on the bottom. Kind of depends on the tablet you have. Mine are up here. So the bookmark sequence was a diagram. Again, I'd started sketching the whole thing, and then I went back and managed the layers, and I turned things on or off. So there's a little bit of thinking through how you have to be strategic on how you're going to tell your story. And how you're going to present it. So what are the key points? So that's important. So then the sequence here was transition from a larger, campus diagram to the sketch that showed a little bit more development and detail to zooming in on a plan. So the way that that's done is literally, you have this, and if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to change it and go to here instead, I would just add a new bookmark, right? So now I've got this one instead. So, or if I wanted to say, you know what, I really want to talk about this thing first. Let's see if I could use my finger here. Like I want to do that one first. That's more important first. So that can happen after the fact. So it's not like once you export the video, if you have a video, obviously the video is kind of set. But beforehand, you can adjust also the duration of these. So if this was wanting to be like, if I really wanted to talk about that drawing longer, I could let that sit for 5 seconds. That I've done that in interviews where I've stretched out sequences, so I knew there was more talking that was going to occur there. And then this was done here. Now this was done really fast. I didn't really export this as a video originally, so that's why it's so fast.
Okay, great. One of the things, so Jonathan and Carol mentioned you can output your stories or scenes to video, your animations to video. We also have a sharing capability, which is becoming online soon, where you can share your scenes on any web-enabled device to allow the viewer to actually follow a programmed sequence, or also to explore the scene interactively, kind of go and look around. Maybe if we have time, we can, I don't know, Carol, if you have, you could show maybe your Acropolis scene or something from the website, or Grand Central Station. If you go to the Explore section of the Mental Canvas website, you could find it there.
Find it here.
Hey, Julie, this is Rod. Well, one question that came in for Jonathan. What has the reaction been when showcasing these types of animatics during job interviews? Have you used Mental Canvas during design review meetings with the client?
Well, maybe those are kind of two different questions, and maybe I can answer both of them. So I would say it's always hard to say with interviews if they say, gosh, I really like that, there are usually comments about other things, but I would say I have enjoyed using the sketched animation export. And I think it gives the client a sense of participation. You're not necessarily showing a final solution. And it's, sketches, I would say not everyone can do sketches, and then doing sketches could perhaps differentiate, a proposal. But I would say the reception's been pretty positive, and I've done the sketch animations also virtually now with interviews. And they've worked pretty well, and had even other team members speak over them. So I'm actually creating these videos for other team members' talking points. So it's not just me that's talking over them. So as far as with design teams, I would say the last example, it was good for kind of getting the team excited. Although I have not taken, in the workflow process, you're designing, doing a sketch, and then there's some handoff that occurred, not handoff, but you have talented designers and colleagues we're working with that will take it to the next step, and then there's some sketching and overlap. So, but in the initial kind of sharing of three-dimensional process and moving through space, it helps them understand where I'm thinking. And they're starting to think about the spatial sequence as well, and it's right out of the gate. So I find that pretty helpful.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say, if anybody wants to ask any questions, they can type them in the Q&A, or they can, there's a raise your hand option, and we can let you verbally ask it. So I can switch to Carol's now, I think, if you want to show that one, Carol.
Well, just continuing the conversation about using Mental Canvas with clients. So this was a project that we did, and it was 3 buildings. So we actually ended up using this every week at our client meeting, because, and then if we didn't, the client would ask for it. So it was really fun. But so we, this was, I'll just show them because it just sort of shows, but it was like 3, called the Phipps House, and it was basically 3 buildings with different lobby configurations. And we used this video kind of just to show how, even though these 3 lobbies were very different in space, that they were united by a similar palette of materials and, amenities. And so we just sort of it's wonderful, just really this client just loved it. So it was great. And I even, because it was kind of complicated with weird, you're always trying to create order in chaos, the columns are in the middle of the space or something, you have to resolve it. So, you're trying to figuring things out. And I did actually use this to help myself figure out what the design was going to be. So it was actually useful. And, so this is in our cover, I guess. But the architecture, we had this idea of the magma, which is shown in orange, as this sort of warm element and material that would sort of seep inside our interior space and kind of unite everything together. So it's very conceptual, very kind of cartoony, but you can kind of see how spatial it can be, you know, and it really just gets, as Jonathan says, you know, this is the fun part of architecture, because, you know, usually we have to do documentations, you know, we're calculating, you know, everything is calculated. It's like very like budgets, numbers. But this part of architecture, I feel so lucky that I can draw and use this to, you know, this tool. So it's sort of like the fun part of art, you know, it's just fun. And it is a tool that connects people together, you know, and also the design. So I don't know. Is there, Julie, is there anything else you want me to show? I could do the Acropolis or the Central Station.
Oh yeah, Grand Central Station. That'd be.
And Carol, I might add on to your comment there, like the sort of liberating nature of working in. There is certainly a learning curve, because it's a sort of a paradigm shift in terms of how you approach drawing and digitally, and I'm still kind of in the midst of kind of learning that. And so, but the idea that you don't have to build a model that's to scale, that you have to then elevate each of the pieces and put it together. Like as soon as that happens, where you have to sort of map out the steps in your head in terms of design, although you still have to think about it a little differently, it can be quite, I would say, liberating in just drawing. And you don't have to think, I'm going to draw here and I'm just going to get lost in the drawing. And I think that's good. So, but you know, it's just understanding, like any tool, understanding sort of the parameters of scenes, whether your focus is on setting up a series of scenes or moments along a path, or is it just immersing in a design and sketching, and then you're just adding three-dimensional aspects over time. So there's different ways to approach it, but it is and the interface, I would say, I've been kind of surprised in how fast you can just kind of orbit and move in and out. There's no lag, so that's helpful.
I couldn't find Grand Central Station, so I got the next thing is the Acropolis. Everybody loves the Acropolis, but it's yeah, a lot of it is, and I really, Jonathan, I really liked your presentation too, because then I'm so impressed that you learned so quickly. It's taking me years, and it's only taking you months. But it is true. Like you can fake the three-dimensional aspect by just doing a little, just like a little bit of a twist. Like this is really pretty much. I was using right angles, and you know, but it's sort of, it's a stage set. You know, you're doing what they do on the stage. You're just skewing something for a certain angle that's only going to be seen a certain way. You don't have to draw everything. And I just, you know, what I love about it is the transparency, you know. And oh, actually, I think this one is an older. It's not a current one, because I added the new museum, which is.
We do have one question from Ann Patterson. So Ann, I think if you unmute, you could ask your question now.
Yeah, I have a question about transparency, especially on Carol's. A lot of the drawing, everything's made with the line. So that like the trees that Carol was drawing, then when they became big in the foreground, they were still very sort of harsh. Can you draw in a different way where you could make that object translucent so you can kind of see through the tree? Because very often in layering, it seems like translucency changes with depth.
Well, you definitely can control the opacity of, you know, with your pen. You know, like there's this, for example, you know, like this is 100%, and then you can get transparent, you know. So I mean, you know, you can definitely So, but it's not like, and you also have pencils. You have, you can do, I use more, it's sort of my style maybe is more like markers, but I mean, the pens you can shade, like it's really like, you know, it's like, you can render it, you know, I can make clouds or something, you know, and it becomes more tones and stuff too. You know, you're able to draw. Is that my answer?
Yeah, maybe, and let me take a stab at adding on to what Carol said. Each pen we can set the opacity going from, you know, sort of to create something like occlusion paint, which Carol used earlier, to with her people, to, you know, so you couldn't see through them, all the way to you know, very transparent. And within each canvas, you can have a layer stack and a set of opacities stacked within that. And then you can also, of course, have canvases up against canvases. So Carol's particular style is very spare. She does a lot with lines. Some of our other artists, you know, use a lot more in terms of layering and stroke depth and so on. I hope that answers your question, but feel free to ask an additional question if we've not covered it.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, that kind of answers my question, but I do have another one.
Sure.
Seeing as I guess it's kind of perspectival based, it's interesting that Carol kind of started with flat tableaus, almost like a diorama, and then Jonathan, just in the example that he did, he sort of started with a plan. So I'm assuming that whatever you start with, the other thing is sort of being generated. Like when Carol started her drawing, because she did one live, the top right-hand corner was kind of like generating a plan view. So there must be two things going on simultaneously. So the computer's generating a kind of a 3D model.
Yeah, so there's no, let me just say a couple things technically, and then I'll hand it off to you, Carol. But I think there's no actual 3D model here at all. It's all, to the extent that you see 3D, it's all about the juxtaposition of canvases relative to each other, canvases and strokes. One thing that you're seeing in that upper right window, the bird's eye view, is that, so there are different ways of using the software and they're not mutually exclusive, but one thing you could do is, Jonathan showed a plan earlier. You could bring in an image or a reference drawing and then use that to kind of pull things out. So he, for example, showed something where he had basically taken, sketched over a roof and then pulled it off that original canvas. So it's, those strokes are now sitting in space. And then in another case, Carol actually drew something on a background. She drew her skyline and then some water, and then she selected those water strokes and actually rotated them or projected them off the canvas so that they connected to another canvas that was in the foreground. So the kind of spirit of the system is all about placing strokes on canvases in space and then being able to reuse or manipulate those strokes later. And then of course you can go in and add additional drawings, but it's very much like the process of sketching on a flat canvas, but now sort of reimagined in space, if that makes sense. And Carol, feel free to jump in about how you think about things.
Yeah, what you said is really right. I mean, it's really not the software that's dictating how you draw it. It's really coming from how you think as a designer. Like Jonathan started with plans because a lot of architects start with a plan. Actually, we start with everything at the same time. We're always going back and forth. It's plan, elevation, section, perspective. So that's why when Jonathan showed the last sheet with everything on it, it really is, that's part of the process. So a lot of times I start with the plan and then I kind of start bringing up the elevations. It's like everything I'm doing on Mental Campus is actually what I would be doing on Trace. I mean, in general, in terms of the process. Is that right, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I would say in the last one, the last example, I finally kind of, you know, up until that point, I was thinking more of series of scenes and moments, you know, not unlike if I had my sketchbook and I was doing almost like a journey of sketched moments that I knew there was they were a handful of key things that I wanted to capture. And not until this where I was, but in this one, it was like if it was on a wall in our studio, or this drawing, if you imagine now, fortunately, you know, this thing is large enough that I can kind of think about it like it's on let's say it's a site plan, it's 1 to 100 or something like that. The nice thing is that my roll of trace in this case is endless, and I can kind of keep going to the right or zooming out. And so I was like, well, I'm going to think about this in 3D, and I'm going to zoom in and sketch. So these are sketches. These are not images that I dropped in. I drew them right in mental canvas. And then if I needed to, I would make them 3D if I needed to. Like sometimes you, just because you can doesn't mean you need to. And so I was using it sort of mostly in this case in 2D, and not until I sort of wanted to look at and needed to understand the approach did I elevate this piece up to 3D, because I wanted to understand its built, this form, when I was ready in relationship to the existing buildings. Because too much info, I believe that with design, it starts with kind of like one thing, and then one thing leads to the next. If you try to do all of it at once, you will just get paralyzed. And so I think in this case, it was 2D and then getting comfortable. Kind of like when you do a series of sketches and when you're ready to physically model it, you know, you feel comfortable enough with the way it's arranged, and then you have a model done, and then you've right. So it's yeah.
Yeah,
So I like this example in particular because it sort of gets back to what I said at the beginning, that the kind of inspiration for Mental Canvas was a kind of architect's sketch books, or a page where you have multiple drawings of a project that indicate things at different scales or different concepts that don't quite all go together yet. And I think what I like here is that Jonathan was doing sort of almost a Ken Burns style kind of animation just across that drawing or set of drawings. And then, you know, he took this roof and kind of pulled it out, and then he can do a little bit of an animation that kind of gives you a feel for what this might be like in space. Again, like I think if I tried to do this with a CAD system, it would just be too much too soon and just too rigid. So I think this was very effective, particularly for those two reasons.
I really like this drawing too, because it was sort of like a surprise at the end. Like you kind of went backwards, flipped it around, and then it grew.
Yeah, the backwards piece was accident. I was like, oh shoot, I should have rotated that.
No, I liked it. It was kind of nice. It's sort of like you smile. You're like, whoa. Yeah. I like that. But that's the thing about Mental Canvas. It's that dimension. You go backwards. It's so neat sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you don't really expect it yourself. You're like, whoa. Because sometimes you get lost in it. And then, you know, that's why we have the canvas. You know, those bookmarks are really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bookmarks are critical.
Yeah. So I'm waiting for the Mental Canvas wall, because then you can really do the matrix thing. Woo, woo. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Anne had a follow-up question about whether this would be useful for students, and I think so. We've actually had a lot of requests and interest from around the world from architecture students and, you know, also some art students, but, you know, kind of seeing this particularly for preliminary design, and, you know, I think in design reviews, I've been on design reviews where students have, you know, jumped into CAD and presented these kind of CAD renderings or CAD models, and the critics have asked them to kind of go back to drawing because what they're presenting is so rigid and just seems sort of too far ahead in the process. And I think that the beauty of the sketch, of course, is that it's as much about what it could be as it is, and just invites critique and more further development. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for use in sort of learning to design and learning about seeing possibilities in design.
I agree.
Okay, any other questions? I don't see any right now. So I'll let you wrap up, Julie.
Okay. So if you think of follow-up questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to email us the address that you was used to invite you, or just info@mentalcanvas.com is simple. I want to thank Jonathan and Carol so much for sharing their experiences and insights with us today, and thank all of you for attending. We look forward to hearing more from you, and I hope you'll follow the development of Mental Canvas in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, thanks for the support.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.